Hello, everyone. I should be coming through the airwaves to you. It's episode 221. Apologies for the week pause. I was away and I had plans to line something up, but they for very good reasons they fell through. So we took a little pause and let you all just enjoy the election fervour. Yes. It's going to be a chat. This is going to be a mostly open Q&A session one where we just kind of have nice conversations with each other. A bit like old times, a traditional natter, as it were. However, there are some things we're going to get through because and before we crack on though, let's just shout out the class 221 here, the Super Voyager as they were called for a bit. Here's one. It's already got a hole in it and looks pretty bashed up, but it's an original livery. I travel in both these and the 220s so much. Good grief. Commuting in these, travelling long distance in these, it's just so much. And they were just not fit for purpose. There's going to be a cross-country episode coming up soon. I was going to do a cross-country episode for one of these two, but then the election got called and it changed up, didn't it? What makes these super compared to the regular ones? These ones had tilting capabilities, although I think all of them have their tilting capabilities now locked out. But these ones could tilt a bit. So there we go. Discuss at any length the Pendos on HS2 plan. Oh, we'll get there. Save up your questions for a bit. We'll revisit. We can discuss those things. Although I think that was a bit of a just Alston wanting to have some money to extend the life of the Pendos. Doesn't mean it's a bad plan, but anyway. No, we are of course going to be talking about the election. Now what happened in this election? Well, I don't know. Everyone, welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. As the Intercity 225 fades away, what is there to discuss? We finally reached the find out part of the of this kind of British epoch, so there are lots of faces gone that I'm very pleased about. In particular, one of the worst transport ministers we have had in decades, this man here, they're gone. We can get to questions about what will happen with the Conservative Party in the future. In fact, we will get to the discussion point. What I've done for this episode is I've lined up just a load of data related to the election, including the results, including the just key things, bits and pieces I've picked out that I think are interesting that we can pick up, and then we can discuss all sorts. We can toast the demise of the Conservative Party. We can lament the rise of their replacement doing very many things the same, but notably a couple of things more recently, in fact, the last couple of days, different, that are worth commenting on. We'll get there. It's going to be a chat with all of us, so line up your questions. We'll open to the open Q&A once I've gone through my various kind of thoughts. There's not a complete list of thoughts. It's a bit of an open plan episode, as it were. Chance to have a discussion with all of you lovely lot who aren't watching the football. Apparently football's on tonight. I don't know who's. I presume England. Who are England playing? Not sure. Graham Harth, you're right. Royal Mail not going by rail is not good news. Yes, it's bad news. Anyway, right. So first of all, let's talk about vote share. We're going to start with vote share. Why? Because I think it's interesting. So about a third of the votes went to the Labour Party, 34%. 24% of the vote, so less than a quarter of the vote, went to the Conservative Party. 14% of the vote went to Reform. So 38% of the vote, which is more than the Labour, went to the two right-wing parties. However, reasonable amount of analysis suggests that Reform are just simply never going to... It's not the case that Reform will come back to the Conservative Party. That the Reform vote splits in a variety of different directions. It's not just an abandonment of the Conservative Party. So it isn't the case that the two of those as a bloc could challenge Labour. It's much more likely that Labour don't achieve anything by the next general election, and that's why they disappear out. There's absolutely a case, as we'll come to later, of the Conservatives losing this election, not Labour winning the election. But anyway, who else? So of the parties that got a decent whack of the vote, next were the Lib Dems at 12%, and 6% of the vote went to the Green Party. But we don't live in a country where this means anything. So what does this actually mean in terms of seats? Because this is pertinent. So this is what it means. This is... Oh, wait a minute. Let me do some fixing because I have some animation where there shouldn't be animation. Animation. Leave me. There we go. Several slides where there is animation that I want to get rid of. Thank you, animation. You're gone. Be gone with you. Oh, there we go. It's done. It's done. Right, so... Sorry about that. So, 2019. This is the result. The result, because there have been some boundary changes, but this is roughly what the result would have looked like of the, what is it, how many seats are 650 total number of MPs. 650. That's roundabouts. That's an odd number. No, 650. There we go. So, 2019. A large amount of blue, just sizable. The good thing about hex maps, I like the hex maps because the constituencies are broadly proportional to population. When will the next general election be? It's very likely to be in 5 years' time, so it'll be in 2029. Got that to look forward to. Anyway, so this is the 2019 map, as it were. And you can see what things are there. There's like one green down here, with a little bit of red around it. Now, what happened in 2024? There's a lot of red appeared, and there's a lot less blue. There's a lot more yellow, or orangey yellow, and a couple of Reform seats as well. So there's 5 Reform seats, which is rather depressing. There's you can't. There's one, two. There's one in that direction, one in that direction, one there, one there, one there, and one there. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's depressing state of affairs. It gets even more depressing in a minute. This is... Oh, wait a minute. Why is it? Not sure what... Anyway. I'll tell you what. I'm going to go big face. In fact, I want to make my face appear in a second anyway. I'm going to go big face for a sec while this fixes itself. There we go. Just abandon that. Reinstate that. Press this button. And... there we go. And... None. There we go. Good. Oh, my goodness. It's been a long day. It's been a long 7 or 8 weeks for various reasons. May come to light soon. So let's go back to my small. Let's get my small face. It's me. Sorry, I'm really looking puzzled. Hi everyone, it's me. Small face. Right. So 2024. What can we learn? Lots of red. Huge amounts of red. But what's interesting is if you go into the second place map, the reason this is interesting is because you get to see the spread of there are a few interesting things from second place, and this will come as we look through the data in a minute. So the other things are the number of greens. Now, greens very much in the urban heartland, which is useful. So if you compare to, firstly, look at the Labour areas. The Labour areas have either gone to Reform, so 2019 Labour areas, the second place is Reform, by and large, which is quite interesting. Now, the extent to which that's because all the other parties are all the other opposition parties are split, but Reform is the largest sort of staunch lump. It's interesting, but also in London you see the second place. There's a lot of green there. There's a lot of green. There's a lot of green in and around Bristol. There's a lot of green in the urban parts of Manchester. Manchester, Leeds. There's a sizable amount of green going on that's quite interesting. There's still a lot of Conservative parties. So the Conservative Party they're not down and out quite yet. So I think, having a look at the second place, I actually asked for Open Innovations to do this second place map, and I'm glad they did because it's quite interesting. So, of course, as we talked about, the proportionality of all of the percentages is irrelevant because we have first past the post, which means that we have an enormous majority for Labour. It's huge, Bath Party level majority. There you are. So we've got loads of Labour MPs, we've got a group of independents, and then we've got the Conservative Party looking pretty feeble, and the Lib Dems next to them looking pretty chunky, with a slice of SNP and 4 Green MPs. There's the four Green MPs, which is tremendous work for the Greens, fair play. They've massively increased their vote share. We'll get to that in a second. The Greens now have, what do they have? About 2 million votes versus about what was it about? Yeah, in fact, I have the numbers in front of me, which I can tell you exactly how many votes they got. I would have them if I hadn't thrown the Excel spreadsheet away somewhere. It doesn't matter. Anyway, there's the votes. A huge content. The important messages. Let's go through the important messages before I Q&A this, because we need to Q&A. So they got 6%, but they got about 2 million votes in total. It's a sizable chunk of votes. Is that right? Or have I made that up? They got 1.5 million. They got a sizable chunk. We'll get there in a minute. Anyway, turnout is expected to be the second lowest since 1885. This ended up being true. From Sir John Curtis here. I hope he stays well. I hope he gets a good rest either side of the election. They work him hard. This will be the second lowest turnout in a UK election since 1885. Oh boy, it's a good thing about it's a healthy democracy in action right there. The consequence of this, so a variety of things. This is a bit of a chaotic order. So the next thing, this is actually from data before the election. The final results of the intention and the shift of intention of implied versus actual voting intention won't be complete until months after the election and all the analysis is complete. Basically what this is saying is talking about how the extent to which Labour have taken votes from other parties. So you can see a sizable percentage of the vote has gone from both Lib Dems and Green being lent to Labour, a chunk from other, almost none from Reform, and quite a lot of don't knows. So Labour picked up this broad, bearing in mind these percentages are not quite right because they're based on intentions prior to the election, but they give a feel for the split, and essentially Reform voting are not lending any votes to anyone. The Conservatives, strange enough, are nabbing Labour, they're nabbing some. It's a very strange mix. But anyway, more interestingly, let's talk about the Greens for a minute. So Brighton Pavilion, the Greens kind of lost some share to Labour. But if you look in all the other seats that the Greens won, actually, let's look at Bristol Central, where Thangham Debonair was roundly and systematically flattened by the Green vote. Sizable result, basically almost a complete flipping of from Labour to Green, a complete abandonment of the Labour vote in Bristol Central, which is fantastic. But what's interesting is that in 2 rural constituencies, it's the Conservatives that have been abandoned. Some of that vote going to Reform, but a sizable chunk of it going to the Greens. So it's interesting to see what that will mean for politics in those areas and what that means for messaging. But an increase in the vote share from just under 3% to 7% is over a doubling of their vote share, which is fantastic. And they are second place in 47 constituencies, as we'll talk about in a minute. They're putting them in a very strong position to challenge the next general election. So we're talking about the potential for them to become a serious electoral force in the next general election, which is exciting. So lots of second places, including sizable amounts of London, but also Norwich South, Nottingham East here. But there's lots of London bits, London. Lots of London, and then bits of Liverpool, plenty of Manchester. The Brighton areas, Oxford, Bristol, massively. Leedsy places, Sheffield, crikey. I mean, can you imagine? And then, more Liverpool as well. And then a bit of Wales as well. So that's quite impressive. What's worth looking at is the total number of votes required to elect one MP. This is when we talk about how effective our democracy is. Oh my goodness. All the spanners in the chat tonight. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, nearly just under 2 million votes for the Greens. Thanks, Gareth. Yeah. So, 4,400 votes went kind of per elected MP for the Green Party. Reform would over 1 million votes per seat. That's an excruciatingly, much as I don't want Reform to get any seats, I still think we'd have a healthier functioning democracy if we allotted if we had proportional representation. The thing is, for proportional representation to happen, a lot of other things would have to happen as well simultaneously. So, whereas you look down here, and this is kind of one of the stories that, as a lot of people are saying, including very smooth-brained Ian Dunt, saying this is Labour being precise and efficient and having this fantastically efficient vote, and that's why they won. It's like, well, firstly, no, it's just that everyone voted to get rid of the incumbent party. But also, it just indicates that Labour have an incredibly small mandate. They've not got they've been it's a sign of an unhealthy democracy if there's a lot of people who feel like Labour are in there without having been voted, having had the popular vote in. So yeah, not great. I mean, first past the post is a horrendous situation. So it's a horrendous way to actually manage democracy. But anyway, maybe more on that in another episode. What else? This is a very interesting trend that was picked up by John Burns Morgan in the FT. Let's go back to basically back to the Churchillian elections and the 50s. So 60 years ago, 70 years ago now. From this point, tracing along onwards, the trend is generally for the two major parties to continue to reduce their overall vote share and for us to diversify the vote substantially. The two outliers are 2017 and 2019. These are outliers because Brexit was kind of a rerun of a referendum type situation. But if you look at it's an enormous, a staggeringly small amount of the overall vote share has gone to the two main parties, whereas we're at the point where it's almost going to be the case where half of people are not voting for either of the two main parties in the next general election. It's very likely that will happen. We're getting very close to that point now. 42% of the vote going to other people who aren't the main parties. This is Jack Elliott saying the mega trend is towards disproportionality. Yeah, the situation we've got here is that what this means is that first past the post is becoming increasingly unfit for purpose to represent people's political beliefs and political opinions. So this is not really a very healthy situation at all, but it's quite interesting. And we expect to see this continue to happen. And there are some other trends that I'm going to pop up in a minute. A thing I wanted to talk about, this is just a pertinent point because I know that it has aggravated a lot of people and entertainingly so. 2019, what was considered a rout, a disaster for the Labour Party, 10.3 million votes for Labour in 2019. 2024, a landslide victory for the Labour Party, an enormous... an absolutely enormous majority on fewer votes, on 500,000 fewer votes, over 500,000 fewer votes. That's oh dear, not I would say that's not a sign of a healthy democracy. It's also quite funny because it's obviously upset quite a lot of the Labour right. Anyway, these trends are where we start getting really interesting because this tells us what's going to be happening in terms of, this is not just the next general election, but also the discussion, where the political manoeuvring and where the political debates are going to be held, where they're going to be held in relation to the centre ground or left versus right over the next 5 years. So let's look at this first graph here is looking at the size of the majority for all of the seats that were contested in this election. In 2017, you could see that there was a kind of a thin tail where you had these sort of enormous majorities, all held by Labour, by the way. And now this kind of, by and large, the pattern remained the same in 2019, although lots of those majorities were reduced, but you still had some of these tails with large majorities, again, Labour Party majorities. Whereas in 2024, that has just completely shifted. So now the size of majorities has reduced enormously down to, right down to kind of where you getting majorities in excess of 30, even 40,000 in 2017. In 2024, we're looking at majorities of barely above, most majorities are in the 5 to 10,000 region, and certainly pretty much all of them are up to the 10,000 region now, with hardly any now above the 15,000 region. Also, you notice that it's all the blue votes here are in the lower end as well, which is quite interesting. So there's the stories at the next general election are going to be interesting. So that's very interesting. So what that means is that there's not really, we're in a situation where a lot of seats are marginal now. Andy Kay is saying, can I suggest we not call the vote lead a majority, as very few of them had a majority of voters? Yeah, it's a very good point. Big majority MPs were banned by the party from campaigning in their constituency. Well, yeah. So here we see a situation where, I would describe this as everything is up for grabs now. Right, so the next, what I think is quite interesting, the next graph here is the share of seat winners at each election. So this is pointing out how much of the vote share seats were won on. In 2015, interestingly, the trend was a little bit back, but certainly in 2017 and 2019, the majority of seats were won on. So let's have a look here. Yeah, the majority of these were won on between 50 and 70% of the vote. The majority of seats is a little bit lower in 2015. In 2024, that's dropped right back down to there being this kind of really strong bias around, kind of a strong lump around the 40% mark. So the amount of vote required to win has dropped. This kind of happens when there are more parties getting involved because the vote share is being split apart. And the last, so we looked at that. What's the last trend? Something completely different that I found interesting, and this is correlative, not causative, of course. Is that the percentage of people who drive to work is directly proportional to the likelihood that people will vote reform. In fact, pretty strong correlation, and kind of a bit like that, really. This one's quite fun and quite interesting. But yes, this is correlative because, the reality is that reform is, relates to drivers, relates to rural vote, the right-wing vote in the rural areas, yes. So it's not an unexpected response, but it's kind of interesting. Does that mean that if you provide better public transport, fewer people will and encourage people out of their cars, fewer people will vote reform? Possibly. More likely, it's that the better thing to do is to urbanise more and reduce the size of rural populations. So that's there are some outliers, by the way. There's some outliers, but in terms of the reform vote, pretty much, there's that direct relationship between the number of people who drive and the number. Yeah, but also you can see there's 1, 2, 3 1 seats. Presumably there's 2 other reform 1 seats somewhere in this bubble plot. Anyway, right. So what else? Oh, very important result is not only bad suburbs as well. Very good point. Not just rural, but also bad suburbs. Yeah, absolutely. With some notable exceptions such as Duffield, there were a lot of people who stood, women who stood on a explicitly transphobic platform, and they were obliterated. They lost their deposits. They came bottom or near bottom in almost all cases. So that's a fantastic bit of good news to feel happy about. Detora is saying, greetings from Ireland with its lovely proportional representations. Single, is it the single transferable vote with multi-seat constituencies? So avoiding issues with parties choosing order of lists. Yes, it's good stuff. Even Duffield got 10,000 votes less than she got in 2019. Very nice. Alison Teal lost her deposit. Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely, Katie. Yeah. So, right, the bit that you're all here to talk about. Let's talk about the Department for Transport. Staffing in the Department for Transport. Let's start with that. I'm very pleased, genuinely pleased. It's a positive thing, and I think we should feel good about it, that Louise has retained the brief that she is Secretary of State for Transport. It's really really good news. I'm really happy about this. Oh yeah, Joanna Cherry went as well, and Person, absolutely correct. Yeah, I was very pleased about that. So yeah, Louise Haigh, very pleased that she is Secretary of State for Transport. Other staff appointed. So Peter Hendy has been appointed. He's a Lord and has been appointed as the Minister of, basically the Minister of Rail. We'll get in a second into the brief, but basically he's second tier, so Minister of State for the DfT. But as you'll see by the next slide, you'll see what the brief is. And then there are 3 parliamentary undersecretaries in the form of Mike Kane, who I don't know hugely well, Wythenshawe and Sale East, Manchester area. Lillian Greenwood, of course, Nottingham South. It's good that Lillian is involved in transport. And then Simon Lightwood, who's Wakefield Rothwell. Lillian, fantastic that she's involved in the Department for Transport. I'm very pleased about that. I don't know much about Mike or Simon. We'll see what they're up to, but they've broadly got roles appointed to them. So let's see. So Louise obviously is the Secretary of State. Mike Kane and Simon Lightwood are looking at. Mike Kane's looking at aviation, maritime, and security. So okay, fine. Let's see what stuff we hear about. A key person to be speaking to about. Thinking about how we reduce aviation numbers and look at the language around aviation numbers. At the same time, look at the language around maritime and the relationship with some of the nonsense about free ports we're still hearing, because that seems to be the fixation with free ports seems to have been retained by the current Labour Party from the previous Tory government. Mike Kane also over security. So there's some aviation, the key one there, but also interested in maritime elements. Simon Lightwood critical on local transport. So I suspect Simon will spend a lot of time doing bus related stuff. But Simon Lightwood there will be taking on that role. So that's a key thing to pay close attention to. Lillian is picking up roads, interestingly. Future of roads, they've called it. But it'll be interesting to see what Lillian is doing. I'm presumably there'll be things like old car policy. So in terms of future of roads, it'll be very interesting to look at what that means in terms of SUV sales and size of vehicles. So those are all things that we can be pestering Lillian about. Hendy's got rail. I've had so many people going whoop whoop hooray about Hendy taking on this role. I do not share the same positivity for a variety of reasons, most of which we're not going to get into now. But broadly, I just point people to Hendy's legacy on the rail industry, of which he's been essentially fat controller of for the last however many years now that he's been chair of Network Rail. It's not a good legacy for our industry. The extent to which that's Hendy's, I'm sure Hendy will say that that it would have been much worse without him. I'm not so sure. The relationship with Hendy and the unions has been strained in the past. He's said a lot of pretty grim things about union membership. He'd argue that's politicking, but principles are important. I don't know, a millionaire who takes a taxi all the time in charge of railways. Yes, he's a keen enthusiast of railways and gets involved in railway things and is. I don't know. So I'm jury's out on the viability of that appointment. But Louise being Secretary of State is key. That's key, because remember that all the other appointments, the non-Secretary of State appointments, are broadly ceremonial. So really, it's Louise who we need to be paying very close attention to. And so far, mostly so good. We had an immediate meeting with the unions, which the previous Secretary of State had just been refusing to do. That was below him. Stupid. But Louise immediately met with Mick Whelan, Mick Lynch, and spoke to the unions. So that was immediately positive. I was very pleased to see that. There is another thing. So Louise has listed her 5 sort of missions, if you like. Everyone's got missions these days. Strategic priorities. Here we go. So these are the 5 priorities, and then we really are going to jump in and open things up to questions. First priority is, well, these say 5 strategic priorities, but in no particular order. But it's 5 strategic priorities, including, well, no, that there are 5 bullet points, so that's all of them. But anyway, improving performance on the railways and driving forward rail reform. So fine. So progressing the Getting Britain Moving document that we've gone through in only a few episodes ago. Well worth going back to that episode if you want to understand what that document says, because we went through it in good detail. Improving bus services and growing usage across the country. Absolutely agree with this. Louise has been a really big champion of buses as part of her campaign, as part of campaigning in the run-up to the election, but also beforehand. Big champion of buses, so that's really positive. This one's a bit more interesting. Transforming infrastructure to work for the whole country. Okay. I don't know what that means. I mean, I can imagine what it might mean, but in terms of what it actually says, it doesn't say anything particular. So I'm a bit curious on that. Promoting social mobility, that's good. And tackling regional inequality, well, that's kind of just saying levelling up, but it needs to be backed up with cold, hard cash. So, what else here going on? So, delivering greener transport is just a bullet point. Oh, okay, fine. And better integrating transport networks. Again, that good, yes, good, but I'm hoping that means better integrating devolved transport networks. We'll see. So some of these don't really say very much, which is 3 of them. The top 2 are, we kind of have a much clearer understanding of what that looks like because Louise has spoken a lot about them. So we have to pay close attention to what those 3 mean. This is also interesting. Louise is saying, "Move fast and fix things" is the new motto of the department. Again, that will remain to be seen because it's Treasury that causes the problems. Growth, net zero, opportunity, women and girls' safety, health. None of these can be realised without transport as a key enabler. Absolutely agree with that. Haig said the DfT would think about infrastructure and services together at every turn. In her address to staff, she also said the department would focus relentlessly on improving performance on the railways and introduce much needed rail reform. Okay, fine. So let's see what it ends up actually meaning. So let us make my face large and answer some questions. So everyone, what Jack Elliott, what were people slaying about? I don't know. Let's see. So questions. Graham Howarth would have thought that Lillian Greenwood might have got a more senior position. She was excellent as Transport Select Committee Chair. Fully agree. Just as Timson was lorded into prison and parole ministership, maybe Gareth could be. Maybe I could be. I'd have to become a lord, and I would refuse any position in the House of Lords. So it wouldn't happen. They wouldn't be able to turn me into a minister. So I'm being an MP in West Yorkshire, where bus users were the most dissatisfied with service in the whole country. Yeah, it's a good sign. Didn't mention roads or cars once. That's a positive thing. Yeah, that's true. Let's see. What is Labour's stance on unions? Well, they're broadly pro-union, but they're affiliated with a lot of unions, so it should be doing the right thing. That's the thing. Flag people. They didn't put my line in. Cancel RIS 2, 3, and divert funds to HS2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. Well, indeed. Right, Chuck. Can't wait to see how redesigning a roundabout in Shropshire helps with Aberdeen morning traffic. Or indeed how remodelling a roundabout in Aberdeen helps with Aberdeen morning traffic. Shout out to Hardigan. Let's see, right, Jack is giving me a... Jack Elliott, you wouldn't take up a lordship if it meant being a minister of the state. I'm all for abolishing the Lords, but I'd be annoyed with you if you didn't do that. People would be angry at me if I did not take up a position in the House of Lords to be a Minister of State. Okay, I would check with the Discord server. I would check with my Patreon supporters if I was offered such a thing. I prefer to be a backroom dealer. I don't like being a politician. I could quite happily be a backroom dealer, though. Also, key point on Hendy being a Lord and in the House of Lords is that we cannot apply the same scrutiny as if Hendy was an elected official. So I'm deeply uncomfortable with people being put into the House of Lords to become ministers. I'm not a huge fan of that. Right, okay, let's go back through what the questions were coming through. Send your questions again if you're there. Let's chat. Let's chat this. Big majority MPs were banned by... Oh, yeah, we did say that. Yeah, Andy Kay, thanks for your thoughts. Jack Elliott saying that Jack, you have some insight into this. I can't remember what you're talking about. The trouble with me going back to questions from previously is I completely lose the context. Who could or would change the voting system, and how big are the chances of it actually happening? Very unlikely, because the current party in charge just won an enormous majority with a tiny number of votes, relatively speaking. They're very unlikely to shift. So, Jarrett Ao is absolutely making the point about PR that I was talking about earlier. PR allowing extremist parties to win is a red herring. First past the post is significantly responsible for the dysfunction that pushes people towards extremism. Absolutely. They don't feel represented, and therefore they go towards parties that are extreme in the far direction. Chloe Arnett. Hello, Gareth and chat. Hello, Chloe. Welcome. What are the spanners? There's a lot of spanners in the chat. Yes, it's true. Committed to editorial impartiality as ever. Yeah, someone in the chat, not in the chat, someone in the comments of last 2 weeks ago's episode was complaining about, they're saying it's a fantastic podcast, but your biases are on show. It's like, why am I so biased? It's like, well, I'm not biased. I'm just following. I don't know why there seems to be this thick dashed red line where expertise can go to that red line, the dashed red line, and no further. At which point, you cannot follow expertise and knowledge to its logical conclusion of, well, this is the party that if I follow all the evidence before me, this is the party that's the right party. That would actually do the most good for the country. You're not allowed to do that. You have to stop at the dash red line, arbitrary dash red line that says you can use your expertise up to this point, but you're not allowed to use your expertise beyond this point to say which parties. Well, that doesn't make any sense. Everyone has biases. If I'd studied journalism, I would have been in the camp of journalists that disagree with this. I don't think impartiality can ever exist. It doesn't exist. It's a made up nonsense. Okay, allowing proportional airtime to parties is one thing, but in terms of like individuals being impartial, it just doesn't exist. Everyone has internal biases and vested interests. If people are honest about those, then you can still watch their output and understand what they're saying and respect what they're saying. More so, in fact, because you understand that they're saying, you understand the lens through which they're saying, which allows you to then filter the information. Whereas if we're led to believe that the Matelesses, etc. of the world are completely like, the Nick Robinsons of the world are perfect representation of information without any color or lens or sort of shaping of that information, interpretation of that information thanks to internal biases, then pretending that's the case is it's a fiction. They clearly have personal individual biases, whether it's to do with the party or whether it's to do with their life experiences, having in the most cases for senior journalists come through a very narrow route, very narrow series of selection of backgrounds. Life experiences are very narrow on that front. So anyway, right, so send the questions. Let's have a look. Quite a few questions popping through. Let's see. Andy K is asking, do you know what the status of the High Speed 2 land is north of Birmingham? Have they sold it off or not? No, none of it's been sold yet. Everyone's shouting poll. Am I going to do a poll? Okay, let's start a poll. If offered, should GD take a lordship to become a minister? Yeah. Start poll. No, it's done. Let's share your thoughts on that one. Right, so more questions coming through. There we go. Refusing on principle is good. However, my take is that the accomplishing the goals of your principles takes moral precedence. Thanks, Jared. That's a quite thoughtful. Lord Dennis of Colton Junction. Yeah, quite. Oliver Coles, in a Gadget Ban episode, you mentioned that you couldn't run vehicles closer together than their braking distance as with rail. Why do we not apply the same rule to cars, should we? Yeah, we should. We try to. Legally, there's the 2-second rule. There are a variety of things that try and create that separation. But if we did enforce that rule, then the capacity of our roads would massively decrease and people would be unhappy. Christoph et al. Says, last time you suggested the best outcome would be for the Greens to take noticeable vote share from Labour and make it clear they can't assume they'll win the left vote. Did that happen? Very good question. I think actually the block of non-Labour left-leaning votes that has more irked the Labour Party has actually not so much been the Greens, although it has to some limited extent. It's actually been the independents, particularly the Muslim independents, who won against, for example, Jonathan Ashworth in Leicester. That win, that seems to have really irked a lot of the kind of the Labour core, more so than say the Green victories. As ever, there's often a lot of noise about the left wing parties that win instead of Labour, rather than the noise about why given Labour, why for example Labour didn't campaign harder in Clacton. All these sorts of questions where they could have done a better job of actually resulting in there not being a reform. I would be interested. In fact, at some point, I will go through each of the reform wins and look at what that vote breakdown is. Sorry, and understand why. Whether if Labour had pushed harder, they could have taken those seats, or at least prevented reform from getting those seats. But I think there is now a strong. The Lib Dems are market liberals. They're not left wing, but on some subjects they can be a useful force. They can amplify messages from the Green Party. I think the key challenge for the Green Party now is that now they've got 4 MPs and not 1. They need to develop a central strategy and a central strong discipline so that their MPs don't speak absolute shite, like Adrian was speaking absolute nonsense about, or easily misquotable nonsense, even if what he was particularly saying was okay, although I don't know if it was or not. But the Greens must harden up their discipline now on messages related to strategic affairs such as energy, such as the national grid, such as transport. We cannot have, and it's true for councillors as well. Now that the MPs are a larger force, councillors there needs to be this is our party line on this subject. We're not saying that you are, if you're communicating a different opinion, make it very clear that it's your personal opinion. But this is the Green Party line on this subject matter. Things like East West Rail, there needs to be a central Green Party position, not a arbitrary position where councillors oppose it vigorously, or people standing to be MPs oppose it, backed by the usual anti-HS2 nonsense that we've seen for the last so many years. So I think for the Green Party to hold Labour to account, they need to actually have their own positions well set out. The Green Party Twitter account and the Green Party published 10 priorities. Plenty of the priorities were very good. A few of the priorities were absolute gibberish. There's still there are little pockets of personal vendetta, old-fashioned Green politics that need to be absorbed and ameliorated. Let's put it that way. Aidan G, what might it mean for rail and public transport investments now that the Treasury is in the hands of Labour? No difference. No difference at this point. Arguably, from an ideological perspective, this is a party the Labour Party are actually, and Treasury run by the current Labour Party, are actually less likely to spend money than at least the Treasury under previous iterations of the Conservative Party. The Labour Party should be seen as being about in the same position as the Conservative Party were in 2010 on not all issues, but on a lot of issues. Fiscally, that in terms of their approach to austerity and investment, it's kind of looking not dissimilar. I would love to be proven wrong. I would love for all the 4D chess people to be proven right, and actually Labour just start spending huge amounts of money, and they just kind of did their thing to just sort of keep the IMF off their back. Or actually, even though the IMF don't agree with the current Labour position, but just to keep the right wing press off their back a little bit. Although they didn't work because they were still on their back, so pointless, doesn't make any sense. But I am unlikely to be wrong. What is likely to happen is Labour will continue to spend very little, and they will squeeze even tighter on the ability to invest, which is a big problem. So, for example, in their announcements, some of the announcements that have happened give us an insight into what we might see in transport. So already we've had announcements on housing, and when challenged on her housing commitments, Rachel Reeves, when she was challenged on why the state is not, why it's not, she's gone, we're not building any houses, we're not spending any money on building houses, we're just going to make planning magically change so that house builders build more houses. We're going to make planning easier, as if that's the problem. Like, actually, if you look over time on house building, private developers have been building the same number of houses for 50, 60 years. Like, pretty much every year, the same number of houses. The reason we don't build as many houses now as we did 50 years ago is because the number of social houses being built, the number of houses built by the state, built by local authorities, has gone from most to zero. That's basically, roughly, that's the problem. And until that commitment, until local authorities are funded and empowered to be able to build significant volumes of social housing, of council housing themselves, we're not going to fix the house building problem. And we're going to go for another 5 years of house building targets being missed over and over again. So that gives us a hint. Rachel Reeves' response was, it's up to the private sector to fund this stuff. And that's some of the language we've seen in relation to public transport. And as we know, that will not work. It's not feasible. Private money is just not going to come out of the woodwork for transport investment. It's not going to happen. Let's keep going. Let's see. Good questions. Let's go down. Oh, at me. If you've got a question, by the way, I'm skipping over unless I see you've atted my name with a big red thing. But if I'll try and pick up anyone who's missed that. But yeah, if you've asked a question, I haven't picked it up. At me and then ask your question again, and I'll pick it up. Sadiq Khan is giving some hints that some more rail services will get given to TfL. Thoughts? Looks like it might have been mentioned in the mayor's meeting. Yeah, a couple of things mentioned in the mayor meeting I want to pick up. Number one, Sadiq Khan talking about taking on rail. It'd be fantastic if that did happen. It's been talked about for a very long time, and it's gone round and round in circles, and there have been plans, and it's gone yes, it's gone no. It absolutely should happen. Whether we'll see that happen quickly, I don't know. It'd be good if it did, but there's no signs that it looked more like a pitch than this is going to happen. So it just looked like Sadiq Khan restating intent again. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Burnham talking about an HS2 between Birmingham and Manchester, or that it's not going to be HS2. It's like, Burnham, stop saying that. I can see that you're trying to politically manoeuvre. You're trying to create the space for Labour to say they haven't reinstated HS2. HS2 is still enormously popular. In terms of like at business level, and it feels like a betrayal to the North that it was cancelled. Just say you're reinstating HS2. That's a big win. It'd be a big political win to say you've done that. So I don't know. And also anything that you're going to reinstate, anything that you're going to create between Birmingham and Manchester is going to be the western leg of HS2, whether you call it that or not. So I don't, it's stupid and frustrating to see that manoeuvring. It doesn't make any sense. Pay attention to next week's episode, by the way. You'll all enjoy it very much. Jack Elliott, I agree with you entirely on bias, but will it close doors into government? But it will close doors into government activity, no? What? No. You can always do this and do that. Let's see. Ziavus Volieti. Ziavus, I'm so sorry if I've mispronounced that. I think you said you disagree with the DFT appointee. Do you have any person in mind that you'd rather be in that position? I don't necessarily disagree with with Hendy going as rail minister. Louise is absolutely the right appointment. I'm very pleased that Louise is a Secretary of State. I can't name someone who'd be better as rail minister, but I would prefer it to have been an elected individual rather than an unelected individual. Let's put it that way. Maybe more on that later. Let's see. Unbiased journalism is a joke. Let's see. Contrapunctus Mammalia. Thoughts on what can be done to get Royal Mail to use trains in the quite short term? Not much, because we privatised them, so we have no control over them really anymore, which is great. Isn't that fantastic? In that poll, by the way, the results of the poll are 79% yes, 21% no so far. 100 of you voted-ish. So that looks like I do have to take a lordship and become a minister if I get asked. Oh, crikey, okay. Louise, you've been warned. The thought of me becoming a lord would make me personally want to throw up. Yeah, I'm a very principled person. I'd really struggle to pick it up. Callum Martin Bell. Hi, Gareth. Hello. What's your views on the Labour's plans for Great British Railways, private contracts for passenger rail, and when they run out to place them with Great British Railways? So... to answer that question, Callum, what I'd suggest is to go back to the episode on Labour's plans, the Getting Britain Moving plan episode we did, which was... How many episodes ago was that? Not that many ago. Let's go back and see. It was... episode 213. It was episode 213. You can go back and you will get all of my thoughts extensively on that episode, so it's definitely a thing to go through and have a look at. Next time Greens would probably be much better, you'd hope so. Lib Dems not bunch. Lots of nice chatting here. Has there been any progress with the Greens for support for high-speed rail? There has, enormously. Conference is coming up soon. I would hope to see a shift in position at that point, but well, I'm not going to say much more, but let's just say I have now become a member of the Green Party, and that opens some doors to changing things. So that's all I'm going to say on that for now. Anne Person, I don't think that Labour would have won Clacton, but what they did do to the candidate Osu Nepal was unacceptable on every level. Absolutely, yes. Scottish Green MSPs have been highly disciplined on messaging. Absolutely, David's. Yeah, agreed. It's an easy model to follow. You don't have to shed the democratic element of the party to still have discipline at a leadership level, at a national level. Rates are about to go down, so the headroom to borrow is about to go up. We'll see. Hopefully, yes. Let's go up here. Graham Harth. I had massive hopes in 1997 that Labour would have a rolling program of electrification. It is a passion of mine. Will it be different this time around? I know that Louise believes in a rolling program of electrification, but Treasury don't. They don't believe in rolling programs of anything. So it's just a case of what Reeves. It's on Reeves. The member of the Secretary of State for Transport only has so much power. They're very much second fiddle to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. It's delightful to imagine a third party having the kind of machine apparatus, measures, discipline, and electoral success to be able to exert that kind of influence. Excited to see where this goes. Yeah, let's see what happens. Amphitrus has a vanguard class of British socialist hereditary peers fighting back Greco-fascism. Thanks, Poop. Go and watch the other series to see what's going on that. I don't know if that's quite what's going on actually at the moment. That's an interesting interpretation, but I would say that's not politically what's going on at Amphitrust at the moment. If no one has any idea what I'm talking about, then don't worry, you don't have to. What do you think will happen about the lack of orders in Newton Aycliffe, asks James Weatherly. It's a very good question. Hitachi have got a lot of time for a lot of people in Hitachi. I think there's a lot of good people working for that organisation. They really screwed up with the AT300s, with the IET fleet. They're extremely expensive, which is kind of government's fault for procuring it with a bizarre, I think, exceptionally expensive model. But they've been really disappointing. So there's a reason why we're not seeing more Hitachi trains being the natural choice to expand the LNER fleet. It was, and this comes from very, very senior levels in LNER and in DFT, that Hitachi were not going to make the cut for that order because of the quality problems on their fleet, ongoing severe quality problems and the costs associated with that and the disruption. So they've caused real problems with quality control on their fleet, and that's been a challenge. And it means that their orders have thinned out. However, a lot of that I would hope has been resolved for the Auroras, for the EMR fleet. So we'll see when that EMR fleet rolls out, whether that then leads to further orders. The challenge is that there is not a strategic view of rolling stock need. There isn't a strategic view. Cross country at this point really ought to just have a new fleet of bimode trains. The idea that cross country as a service is getting this cascaded mess of old trains rather than just having get rid of the Voyagers, get a brand new fleet, cascade the Voyagers to replace 170s and so on and so on. There isn't this cascading of it. Just like cross country is now being used as a dumping ground. So yeah, but it's a challenge if you mess up an situation. The other thing is HS2, of course, and the delay to the HS2 order. I would be very surprised if the HS2 order doesn't have to be relet anyway, because the material conditions have changed so much, which would then open it back up to Siemens again. Siemens by rights should have won that contract anyway. Their order was compliant. The Hitachi Bombardier order was not compliant. I will reassert that is according to the respective organisations, particularly Siemens, who very, very robustly challenged the order. I don't know. It's not good. Hitachi are in a funny way at the moment. Harry Harrison, it's always back of the cab scene from the thicket where they're trying to come up with the most cost-free policies. Yeah, you need cold hard cash. Jack Elliott, I used to agree with this position on house building, but it's a very UK-centric view. Lots of other countries have the private sector build enough homes when given the ability. But that is the situation, the way the UK works. But also the UK particularly has these monopolistic house builders in the way that I don't think is the case elsewhere. Let's see. Owen O'Neill, I might have missed it. Yeah, we talked about Royal Mail stopping using rails earlier on. Ella, thoughts on if TfL gets control of Thameslink? What should happen versus what you think would? Personal issue for me because Thameslink ruins my local station. I think Thameslink should be part of TfL. I think that Crossrail the Elizabeth line should be renamed Thameslink 2, as you all know. So yeah, I would absolutely, Thameslink would make sense to be integrated into that system for sure. Let's see. I disagree. Unbiased journalism is key to avoiding the level of polarization in the US. It's why the BBC is used around the world. But the BBC, the point is, the BBC isn't. It has impartiality, and that elements of impartiality work and make sense, but the journalists involved in the BBC are biased. They have biases, and those biases are reflected in their output. You just look at what the headlines have, BBC News headlines look like for on their online news output for Israeli airstrikes versus Russian airstrikes. The enormous difference in the way those headlines look is indicative of the fact that there is and this is true for all the news. Like there isn't. It's about providing, the reason you've got the polarization in, right, for starters, one of the key reasons you've got polarization in the US is because you have incredibly rich individuals who own huge swathes of the news media and can express their own personal opinion from an editorial position. That's the case in the UK as well through Murdoch and others. One of the first things I would do if I became Lord President of the universe would be institute a 5% maximum individual holding for any media organisation, which would help to ameliorate that. But yeah. Right, so let's go down to Cal Martin Bell. Gav, what are your views on Labour Party? Where is national in the railway, but private contracts now and then renationalised? Yeah, go back to watch the... Thanks, Cal. Yeah, go back and watch the 213. Let's see what else. Oh my goodness, lots of atted names coming up now. Let's see. Right, how was my holiday? That was all right. I was Dean had a conference and I was looking after a little one. Bring back Adonis? No. Barry Shepherd came in late. Sorry for covering. What can be done about EC4T electricity charging for traction? What can be done about it? For starters, it should be reduced to. A couple of things. It needs reform, and it needs to be reformed. But also, I think the overall numbers need to come down to reflect the source of electricity that the network really uses. I don't think that is correctly accounted for. There are other things I need to dig into exactly, but the model is broken and needs fixing because it's clearly not resulting in the right outcomes. When something is giving outcomes that don't match common sense, it's likely that the process is broken, not that Ella's asking, what about you being in control of a puppet lord who you just tell what to do? Well, that'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Dan Smith saying, you'd have to be a crossbench lord, though. I couldn't see you sitting for any particular party at the moment. Maybe the Greens if they drop the NIMBYism. Yeah, maybe. Jonathan Pallant, what levers can the Secretary of State pull to fix Avanti West Coast? Saw a bunch of new MPs couldn't get in on the first day as trains cancelled. Partly industrial action is causing issues, but a lot of the issues on the Avanti are the fleet seems to be causing a lot of reliability issues, but also driver training as well. So there's a lot of problems on Avanti. I think others have written more extensively on what the problems are. In fact, Jim Williams has written it pretty extensively on what the challenges are there. I think a backlog of training combined with reliability of the fleet, combined with infrastructure challenges. It's not a thing that can be easily and quickly fixed. I would say that one of the key challenges, as with the rest of the network, is that it's overstressed. So it's massively overused. So as soon as any problem occurs, it just ripples up and down the line until everything's wrecked. The timetable falls over. So that's the case. Same on the East Coast Main Line. Both those main lines are massive, and the Great Western as well, massively overstressed, running lots and lots of services right up to the point of absolute saturation of the timetable. So that's not a good way to run a railway, frankly. There's a point at which using your assets efficiently becomes having no reliability, and we've passed that threshold on the UK railway, on the GB railway network right now. Raphael, what's going to happen to the Treasury under Labour? Very little. Absolutely will not be any abolishment. No. Rachel Reeves wants to be like a sort of a Lord Emperor or a kind of a Lady Empress, and so the Treasury is her empire, so she's absolutely not going to get rid of it. Davids, if you want Scottish Greens to lobby Green Party of England and Wales about HS2, I'll see if I can help. They've already done that. When they published their Rail for All report a few years ago, they already were subtweeting the GPW at that point. Oliver Cole's asking about the Royal Mail news. Bad news. It's bad. What my thoughts on CAF and Alstom? Alstom, what was Bombardier in Derby, they build things that look like trains but do not work as trains, and that's a real problem. So the skilled people on the workshop floor can build a thing that looks fantastic as a train, but the software, hopeless, absolutely hopeless. CAF, dreadful. Why didn't LNER go for Stadler flirts smiles for the new trains? Is this public knowledge or what? Or have I missed something? I can tell you exactly why. It's that Stadler just don't have the capacity to provide. So Stadler were like, we don't have capacity. The UK market is not stable enough for us to invest in further capacity. Sorry, so they didn't bother. That's the challenge of having. I'd love it to be Stadler, but they just don't have the capacity or the interest in the UK as a basket case. Jarrett, you mentioned at the start the Voyagers aren't fit for purpose. Can I elaborate? Not in this episode. That's a whole episode in and of itself. Is there a way? Poop is asking. That's a strange thing for me to have to say, isn't it? But there we go. The joys of YouTube. Is there a way for the Labour government to incentivise Stadler opening a factory in the UK? Stability and giving them a massive order. Where are we? Matteo, welcome to the party. Good luck. I get the impression that Matt Edwards. Oh, I'm not going to read that out loud. I don't agree with that, actually. I think I've got a lot of time for Matt. Gareth saying, who from Hitachi was bunging what to who in government? I wouldn't go that far. Trainworms is asking, why was the Siemens order compliant and the other order not? Oh, where to start? Siemens have put a lot of papers and documents into the public domain that can explain that answer. Katie Fenn saying the state of the Meridians and the 222s are dire. They're a mess. Seat padding hasn't been maintained. Given up and go via Doncaster instead. Good grief. Yeah, I can believe that. They're looking very tired. To be fair, it's because the Aurora is really late. Voyagers should be cascaded to razor blades. They're heavy, not very efficient, especially the X-tilters with their 10-ton penalty per car for the heavy bogies. Absolutely, yeah. They're just not very good trains. Isn't headlines on the editors, not the journalists writing the article? Absolutely it is, yeah. Would a Siemens order be able to be built in the UK? They've got a plant open in Goole, and their intention was to expand it to deliver the HS2 order, but they didn't get the HS2 order, so they didn't do it. BBC has false impartiality. Yeah, I have to say I agree with that. And it goes either way. I'm not saying their false impartiality is all in one direction versus all in the other. Invariably, it falls towards the incumbent opinion at the Labour Party, as anyone, given a lot of people in the Labour Party, in the BBC, lots of people in the BBC public school, kind of private school backgrounds, so it invariably falls on that worldview rather than other worldviews. Hence why you constantly get the household finances analogy being used. Let's see. Aidan G, do you think after devolution has become more substantial for the major metro regions that those regions will be able to fund their own transport projects? It requires Treasury to relinquish power. That has to happen. Will it happen though? I do not know. We got actual Auroras in the UK before the EMR Auroras. Absolutely. Cal Martin Bell is asking, what were the Callum, I need to translate Callum's question just a sec. What were the Siemens gave us just contract holders? I'm not quite sure what you're asking there, Callum. Jonathan Pallant, does Ely now having a Lib Dem MP help or hinder the junction upgrade? It depends how long their shiv is and how far through the Treasury door they can get. In Minecraft, parody, etc. Yeah, no, it's a good question. My suspicion is not much headway because the challenge is that it's very expensive, and as I've just been tweeting about and everyone's shouting either positively or negatively about, while we're still locked into trying to justify a business case that simply is incapable of capturing why you need to do, a business case is useless for capturing the strategic need for a major strategic piece of work that everyone knows needs to happen. Everyone knows that Ely North Junction needs massive work, and all the level crossings need to be got rid of, and all the associated signalling work. Everyone knows that needs to happen. Government is unwilling to spend money on it, which is why it keeps making up stuff about business cases and not reaching the point of justification. It's just not going to happen. Okay. Yeah. So, right. I think that, let's keep it short and sweet. I'm very excited for a variety of reasons, actually, because... well, firstly, I tell you what. Let's not tease. Let's go. Thank you, first of all, to everyone for listening to this in audio-only format. I did upload, in a panic, from Vienna, the previous episode in audio-only form. So hopefully those of you who listened to that one, it was vaguely useful for you in advance of the election. This one, as ever, these episodes are always made better by more people joining live. So we got 150 people briefly on this one live, so that's fantastic. The more people join live, and unique, I've not had anyone, people have still not told me what any other podcasts that run like this have been mostly live and interactive. So do send any suggestions. Do send your suggestions. So all good podcasting platforms, you should be able to hear my weird hybrid, mostly Scottish, but also quite soft accent. The usual plugs, patreon.com/Gareth Dennis for Patreon, GarethDennis.uk/ oh no, not for Patreon, to support me on Patreon, to join the ilk, the crew of Patreon supporters. Fantastic, they all are. GarethDennis.co.uk/merch for the merchandise. I need to do some new merch, don't we? Suggestions always welcome on merchandise, or indeed just reminders of things that I said I would do for merch and that I've forgotten since. Missed Apex podcast, says Matteo. The Smoke and Tar podcast, but the questions are Patreon only. Oh, okay. Missed Apex podcast. Someone at me in the Discord to that, and I'll look them up. PayPal.me/Gareth Dennis for loose change and violent words, and GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord for the Discord server where the YouTube chat continues forever. We toil for blood and rails, do the Patreon supporters. Yes, they do, Jack Elliott. Always a absolute pleasure and delight to have all of you along. Next week, this is the fun one. Next week, it's episode 222, episode 222. Talking of Siemens Valaronovos, there's one in the background. It is a high-speed rail network for the UK and Ireland. Yes, it's the What's Gareth's high-speed rail network for UK and Ireland going to look like. What is it? Oh, I couldn't possibly say other than maybe briefly teasing you what it might look like there. This is going to be a fun one. This should be relevant for quite a lot of you, I think. I think a lot of you might be interested in this. We can have a nice, lengthy discussion. We can talk about the caveats. We can discuss where you think changes need to be made. And we can also work out how you're all going to be able to suggest tweaks and fixes and alterations and so on and so forth. That's some good stuff. So episode 222, a high-speed rail network for the UK and Ireland, is next week. Oh my goodness, I'm looking forward to that one. That should be fun. And then following that, we've got a very serious, actually I have a plug to do. Shout out to Nicole Colby, because this book landed with me, The Long History of the Future, Why Tomorrow's Tech Still Isn't Here. Very much wheelhouse rail natter. I would love to get Nicole on the pod. This is Why Tomorrow's Tech Still Isn't Here. Very much rail natter wheelhouse stuff. I want to get Nicole on. I also want to get Riley on to talk about. I was trying to work out why. I mean, I want to get Riley on to talk about tech more broadly and how railways can be a bit of a petri dish for tech that actually does work and isn't trash. Riley Quinn, by the way, the host of Trash Future, but. I would very much, I would very much like to. I'd very much like to get Riley on specifically to talk about STVOL, so like flying taxis, because I think that'd be very funny. So those are some upcoming episodes, as well as other fantastic episodes that I'm very excited about. Yes, I really want to get Victoria Scott on too. So, and it's going to happen. Don't worry, soon. So very exciting things to come. There's a few. Also, Paris Marks has been. I want to get them on I wanted to get Paris on for a very long time. So yeah, Paris also on. Do make your suggestions for guests. Anyway, right, I'm waffling. Everyone, I'm going to wave goodbye to all of you, dear friends, listeners, viewers. Oh, the currency episode. Yeah, Gareth, we need to get you on for the currency episode. That's right. Everyone's mentioning Amphitrust vigorously. I need to fix the game, which is broken. Anyway, enough of that. Right, cheerio, everyone. Cheerio.